4th and 4 at the Tampa Bay 18. Shotgun snap to Prescott. He has time. Throws left side. Wide open is CeeDee Lamb. He'll walk into the end zone for a Dallas touchdown. Nary a Buccaneer within 10 yards. And it's 30-6 Cowboys. And Maher on for the extra point, and it is good. Brett Maher gets a standing ovation after 4 misses tonight.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry, Jay Croucher. Who did it better, Matthew Berry with the chains on set and the bucket hat, or Mike McCarthy, who did a little some kind of waddle there, it looked like.
A little Jalen waddle.
You guys are too young for this, but when I was a kid, there was a toy called Weebles. And it was called
right,
Weebles Wobble, but they don't fall down. And they were like these little round things. If somebody could ever find a Weeble on the internet, but like you would just roll them over. They were like these toys, and that's what he looked like. He looked like a Weeble, like just I don't know, like big sexy going on over there. Mike McCarthy doing his best. Kirk Cousins. And by the way, what's great about that video of him with the gold chains running around. That definitely won't come back to haunt him when they get their asses kicked by San Francisco next week. That absolutely will not.
No, nobody would play it ever again.
No, play that again.
There won't
100%.
be new music over it.
No, that'll never come back. It's good. He's safe. Look, what do you guys have? What? Somebody's in my ear saying something. What? Well, there's okay. Anyway, Pete, our producer Pete, just
he's sad about stuff.
Curb Your Enthusiasm music.
A lot of show left. You know,
thank God.
Matthew, last night with
sir.
Mike McCarthy, and we all liked the Bucs last night.
We did.
Yes, absolutely.
Confess, Bucs plus 2.5. That didn't go great. At some point, I realized that we had the disadvantage in the coaching matchup, and Mike McCarthy was the better coach on the sidelines. And at that point, I knew that we were in big trouble. When they went for it on 4th and goal from the 1, I knew we were done. Yeah.
Right. But it's noon on Tuesday on Peacock, of course, but it is 5 o'clock somewhere. And I'll tell you, one of the places where I hope it's 5 o'clock is Tampa Bay, because they should be drinking heavily. Because that's right. Like, I've said this, and I've said this clearly many times. I believe Mike McCarthy is one of the most overrated coaches in the NFL. And yet, he put on a masterclass compared to what Todd Bowles put out there last night. Todd Bowles is on a list, and I've said this before. Todd Bowles is on a list of really, really good coordinators. He's a very good defensive coordinator. I want to give the man his props. He's a really good defensive coordinator who should not be a head coach. They looked completely unprepared, uninspired, unfired up. You're at home in a playoff game, and they're just sort of like it felt like a Thursday against the Jags. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
just a really brutal. I mean, when you get outcoached by Mike McCarthy, I think there's some, I think Nathaniel Hackett is one of those guys, right? I mean, jury's still out on if he's a good offense coordinator, but he's definitely not a head coach, right? I mean, how much of Rodgers' success was him versus just, hey, he's Aaron Rodgers. I think jury's still out on Josh McDaniels as a head coach. No question about him.
Jury's in.
I'm trying to be kind.
Guilty.
I'm trying to
life in prison.
I'm trying to be
no hope.
I'm trying to be kind to Josh McDaniels. Listen, he's probably going to get Brady next year. So, anyway, but yeah, I mean, there's just guys. The poster child there is Norv Turner, who was one of the greatest offensive coordinators in NFL history and just should not have been a head coach. Todd Bowles in over his head, and there's reports out this morning that Byron Leftwich is likely to be fired as offensive coordinator. Again, all these coordinators getting thrown under the bus for poor head coaching jobs. Joe Lombardi fired on the way in this morning. Brandon Staley throwing him under the bus apparently to try to save his job.
Michael LaFleur gone.
What?
Mike LaFleur gone as well.
Yeah.
I think everyone's focusing on how bad Brady and the offense looked. My bigger problem was the defense was atrocious as well. And they kept on just sending 4. They couldn't get any pass rush at all. Dak Prescott did whatever he wanted. And it was this combination of sending 4, getting no pressure, and then comical miscommunications in the secondary. So CD Lamb, of all people, wide open for a touchdown. It was an absolute catastrophe on every level. I just couldn't believe it.
And again, Todd Bowles is a defensive coach. That's why I'm saying, like, he just got a masterclass in getting out-coached.
Yeah. Can you send a blitz, Todd? Can we get a blitz? One blitz? Come on. It's unbelievable.
And in fairness, like when CeeDee Lamb went for that touchdown and like there was no one around him within like 40 yards. Like the closest guy to him was like the photographer, right, on the sideline.
Literally,
right?
yes.
Literally. You know, and I don't know if you saw this, but camera one, if you can just get a shot of me, they cut to Todd Bowles.
I love when he says that.
They cut to Todd Bowles on the sidelines, and Todd Bowles just absolutely lost it. And I'm going to do a quick impression here. Todd Bowles just absolutely loses it at his defense and does this.
Cameron once had a heavy workload this season.
Blink.
Cameron One needs the offside like Tampa.
He did blink at one point. He did. It's just like it's.
Cameron One needs the cold tub.
Yeah,
right now.
Not great.
Can you take some solace that now Mike McCarthy is locked, as a Commanders fan, that Mike McCarthy is locked in as the head coach of the Cowboys?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's
little
good.
Victories here.
Little
I'm looking
victories.
out for you.
I appreciate. Yes. We still have Ron Rivera, so it's like it's a little
There's
bit
a
of
huge imbalance because Sirianni and Dable are 2 of the 6 best coaches in the league, and then McCarthy and Ron Rivera's up and down.
So this is the tweet I sent out after the game, guys. This is the current state of the current state of the NFC. For those listening at home, I sent out a tweet that basically resets the current state of the NFC East. Philadelphia, of course, is in the divisional round. The New York Giants in the divisional round. The Dallas Cowboys in the divisional round. And the Washington Commanders have 8 active investigations and lawsuits. Shout out to my guy JP Finley of NBC Sports Washington, who I texted to make sure I wasn't missing any.
To confirm the amount
the amount of lawsuits, and we were going back and forth.
I say it took a little discussion.
Well,
right?
yeah, we went back and forth in terms of all right, well, so there's Virginia, and then there's Maryland, and then there's Washington, D.C. Oh, and the District Attorney of Washington, D.C. has the 2 investigations, and then there's a congressional investigation. There's 2 lawsuits from the District Attorney of D.C. So we went back and forth, and I believe the number is 8. But, the day is young. The day is young. We're all off the rails here, Connor. I completely blame you.
I'll steer us right back on. It usually is my fault. Dak has a massive game. It didn't look like he had to do a whole lot, like you said, Jay, with how bad the secondary looked.
Hey, Jay.
Yes,
when
Matthew.
You ski, I assume, right? Growing up in Australia, right?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's quite a warm climate. It's a very warm climate.
How do you? I'm looking at Sean White over here. I'm just curious. When you ski, how do you turn? Do you slalom? What do you?
It's a good word. It's underused, slalom.
I don't
ski.
You don't ski?
No, I just have a jacket on.
You just have
a hockey jacket.
So a hockey jacket, yeah. They skate. In hockey.
Anyway, yeah. All right, fine. Skate us back.
Slalom.
Yeah, it is. But isn't that what you do in skiing? You slalom?
Slalom. Yeah.
Am I wrong, guys?
I think
Someone
that's
get
an
in my
event.
ear and tell me I'm wrong.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
No one in the control room knows.
For the love of God, let's talk about Dak Prescott.
The notorious nation of Australia, known for skiing.
Yeah.
Known for skiing. Back to Dak Prescott
that was
somehow.
the joke, too. Everyone.
Surfing
we have
joke.
mountains. We have mountains.
This is what I'm stuck with.
And sharks.
This is what I'm stuck with,
Yeah,
people.
we're not selling it. Dak Prescott. Yeah, I thought he played well. I think it's
well, when you don't have any pressure, when you have 8 billion years to
I don't know what happened in the Washington game at all. I don't know how he went 14 for 37, but he looked like the guy. He looked like the same guy that completely lit up the Eagles a month ago, where he just looked like Superman. And he did whatever he wanted with his legs as well, which I think he's getting back post the injury. The way that he looked off the safety for the Dalton Schultz touchdown, that's just prime Dak. He was magnificent last night. And I backed the Bucs because I thought that the Bucs had the better quarterback in the matchup, and it wasn't even close.
I thought the Bucs would have the better defense. I did think the Cowboys' defense was a little bit overrated. And look, there's the CeeDee Lamb touchdown where literally if you're watching it on TV, you're seeing this, but if you're listening to it, just literally they showed the play. And the entire highlight, there's not a Buccaneer in. A lot of times you see a touchdown and you see the opposing defense either miss a tackle or that out of position. There's literally not a Buccaneer on the screen. But in fairness, why would you want to guard CeeDee Lamb? Eight, my guy Eight, friend of the podcast, friend of the show, Eight, CeeDee Lamb there. You know what I liked is that one of the plays that we showed was the Dak Prescott on 4th and 1, the touchdown run, where they fake the run to Zeke and then he does the back bootleg and runs untouched into the end zone. The best part of that was, if you're watching the broadcast, Troy Aikman says, "I'd go for 3 here," as Dak Prescott is walking in,
also,
with no one close to
right
him.
after Maher missed the extra point, like from a similar range, or even so. Yeah, I mean that was the most exciting thing about last night's game. Really, was the Brett Maher experience. It was actually unparalleled, and I tried to work out because extra points now, with it being moved back, about a 92% chance of making it.
Yeah, sure.
So like 8%, so the power of 5. Because here's the thing, he missed the one against Washington last week as well.
Yeah.
It was 5 in a row, and I can't even say the percentage chance of this. And he's missing them in all different directions. It was sad, but also very funny at the same time.
Right, he's clearly got the yips.
Every direction.
And here's what's weird. Listen, I'm a Commanders fan, obviously, right? I'm a Washington fan, and so I hate the Cowboys. That's my biggest rival. And maybe I'm getting old and soft. I'm getting soft in my old age. I saw everyone on Twitter, right? Everyone online is just dunking on this kid, right? Just making fun and all the memes about, and I feel bad. I just feel bad for the guy. I mean, I don't know. And listen, he's a professional athlete, and that's part of the gig, right? And you put yourself out there, like whatever. We put ourselves out there every single day. We took the Bucs plus 2.5 yesterday. Looked awful, right? That's a bad call. People give me crap online. I deserve it. Horrible call. I took the over on 0.5 rushing yards for Tom Brady. That didn't hit. Look, I didn't hit Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb. I took the overs on both those. So I went 2 for 2. You hit the over on the Tom Brady passing yards.
Pollard went over.
Yeah, Pollard went over.
Yeah, didn't hit, but
Zeke didn't hit. But whatever. We had a 500 day. It's fine. But whatever. Like, you put yourself out there. That's part of the gig, right? Is that you get the praise and you also get the criticism. So he's a professional athlete, and that comes with the territory. But it became sad after a while.
It was a little
bad.
uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And look, the total was 45.5. So any underbettors should be buying Brett Maher jerseys today because he absolutely saved them. And I don't know. Watching that game and being on Bucs plus 2.5 when it was 24-0, I just started cheering for the Cowboys. I'm like, all right, this team's done. Give me 50. Give me a 50-point loss. You're gonna lose. At least go out in the blaze of glory.
Well, I think what they've done though is by this performance by the Cowboys, they've made the game against San Francisco next week.
Oh, it's a blockbuster.
Now it's interesting.
It's fantastic.
Now it's really interesting here. Let's talk just quickly about some of these guys. Like, all the guys that were supposed to do stuff did stuff, right? So Dak Prescott had a big game, right? 4 touchdown passes, his first since week 18 of last year, okay? I mean, he had the rushing touchdown as well. The 3rd most fantasy points in any game of his career. 25 of 33, again, just wasn't touched at all. I think the most impressive thing in this game, CeeDee Lamb was CeeDee Lamb, 4 for 68, he catch the wide open touchdown. Nice game here for Dalton Schultz. We talked about him in the pregame as well, yesterday's show, right? It's his 3rd straight game with 8 or more targets. He's had multiple touchdowns in 2 of those 3. There have been 30 games over the last 2 years that Dak Prescott has started, including the playoffs, and Dalton Schultz has touchdowns in 15 of them. There is the connection between, and this is one of the reasons why I talked up the over on Dalton Schultz receiving yards on yesterday's show, is because of the connection between Dak Prescott and Dalton Schultz. I mean, again, Gallup catches a touchdown, which is nice, but after CeeDee Lamb, T.Y. Hilton, the ghost of T.Y. Hilton, is playing significant. Yeah, he's playing significant snaps for this team. I don't know that there's a pass catcher they try after CeeDee Lamb. It feels like Schultz is the most viable pass catcher on this Cowboys offense.
Yep. Gallup is looking better. He made some good catches last night. He's getting healthier, but it's probably more of a next year thing before he gets back to being Michael Gallup. But look, they don't have San Francisco's weapons, but that team is loaded.
Especially when Dak is playing at that level. And with all the storylines around the offense, somehow the biggest story still goes back to Brett Maher, who right now we saw Dak's frustration on the sidelines. I think he wanted to go for 2 at that point. We did hear from both McCarthy and Dak after the game on the Cowboys kicking situation and going into next week.
Was McCarthy wearing the gold chains?
That was a short-lived McCarthy experience.
Okay.
We need Brett. He understands that. So, we need to get back on it this week and, get him ready to go. Obviously, we're kicking out, an outdoor stadium out there in Santa Clara. So, he's disappointed, but, we need him. We need him to focus in, and, he's been super clutch for us all year. So, but that's the plan.
I'm Money Mar's biggest fan. Obviously, I've been shown the video of me, and that's just emotion. That's part of it. Yeah, I mean, I talked to him individually, told him after the game, hey, let that go. We're going to need it. I just played like a week ago, so I mean, that happens. But when you believe in each other and you believe in what we're capable of doing and knowing what that guy's done, what resiliency he's shown throughout his career personally, no doubt that he'll come back next week and be perfect and help us win.
So now the question, guys, after this performance by the Cowboys, just completely throttling the Bucs, is can this team legitimately make a run? And we laughed at the beginning of this and said they'll get, maybe crushed by the Niners in a couple of days at this point on short rest. But, if we take a look at the updated NFL playoff bracket, the Cowboys right now to win the NFC are plus 450, so Vegas is telling you they don't have a chance. What you saw from the offense last night, do you think they can get hot and make a run when Dak is playing like that?
Top to bottom, that roster is as talented as any team in the NFL. I mean, they have a franchise quarterback. They have legit weapons on the offense. They obviously have an amazing defense led by Micah Parsons is the best player on defense in the NFL.
Yeah,
but not the NFC. Like him and I think if I was starting a team, and I think I'd take Parsons over Bosa.
For sure. Bosa might have had the better season, but Parsons is the better player.
Is the better player and the more versatile. And anyway, whatever. Whatever. The fact of the matter is,
shout out to Aaron Donald.
They're retired for a minute. They're loaded on both sides of the ball. But where I keep going back to, honestly, is that if you think about the four coaches that are left in the NFC, Kyle Shanahan, Nick Sirianni, Brian Daboll, Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy is fourth, and it's not a particularly close. It takes you a while to get to third, would be my argument. Again, they just dominated the Buccaneers, but whatever. The Buccaneers could barely win the South, right? I mean, we took the Buccaneers plus 2.5 just because the Cowboys looked so bad in Week 18. We thought at home, and we thought Tom Brady, they're going to get up, but they couldn't do it. There's only so much Tom. Tom can't coach the team and play football.
I think one thing
is there a chance? Of course, there's a chance. It's football. There's always a chance, but no, I would not be taking the plus 450 bet on BetMGM.
Yep. I think the thing with McCarthy is at least, Dan Quinn is an excellent defensive coordinator. He won Assistant Coach of the Year last year. So the defense is fine in terms of a coaching standpoint. And then there's just so much talent on offense that McCarthy can only do so much to screw it up, I think, with decision making. And he went for it on 4th and 1.
No, it's fair. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, I mean, the thing with McCarthy is the conservatism on 4th down, the decision making. But he got it right last night. And I just think that, I think that they're going to have the better quarterback against San Francisco. We love Brock Purdy. Dak Prescott is better than Brock Purdy, non-controversial. And so I just think with the amount of talent, and also I think it's a weird thing, but I think the Niners' run defense being so good is actually going to help Dallas. Because they're going to run Zeke into the line twice for 1 yard, and then they're just going to have to throw the ball. Their problem on offense is Zeke and Zeke and Zeke, and they're just going to have to throw the ball, which I think is the way to beat the Niners.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question that you can attack that secondary, certainly more than you can attack the run defense there. Kellen Moore has done a nice job with the Cowboys for a couple of years now. And you mentioned Tony Pollard, and this has been the Tony Pollard year, the year of Tony Pollard breaking out. Big game last night with 18 touches, right? And almost 90 total yards. He played almost 60% of the snaps yesterday. 15 touches and 80 total yards in 3 of the past 4 games. He's going to be a key for them beating the Niners, having him involved not just in the run game and getting those explosive plays, but having him involved in the passing game as well. We took the under on you did. I mean, I've taken my own losses here. We took the under on Zeke, receiving yards at 7.5. He catches 1 for 9, and you're just like, he hadn't caught a ball in a month and a half. So what are you going to do? But Pollard in the receiving game is going to be a key, especially against that rush of the Niners.
Yep. One bet I do like in this game, Dallas, San Francisco, the line is 3.5, which I think is right. I think that's the right line. But the total is 46. To me, that's too low. I think both of these teams are going to score. Dallas still banged up in the secondary. Curse gets hurt with his knee last night. That's going to be a problem. San Francisco pass defense has been a lot more mortal than expected the past month. So I think Dallas will be able to score as well. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game in perfect weather in Santa Clara.
Guys, there's no way to talk about this game without bringing up the question of Tom Brady's future. Obviously, we saw after the game, he's not going to give anything on that, but he will be an unrestricted free agent. He has a no-tag clause in his contract, so they can't franchise tag a 45-year-old quarterback. It just feels like the Brady era in Tampa is over, and that I think he'll still play. Nobody knows, but it just feels like this specific Tom Brady era has come to an end.
It's going to be on your team. It's going to be on the Jets.
I wouldn't bet on that one either.
No?
It feels like a Josh McDaniels reunion could be on the way.
I mean, certainly that's where all the signs are pointing. Yes. Is it just feels like because reunion with Josh McDaniels, they have Devontae Adams, they have Darren Waller,
Omnia.
They have
Omnia.
They have Omnia in Vegas, Hakkasan. But I mean, like, in all seriousness, like, if you just want to, like, if you think about just the Tom Brady glory years, right? I mean, they have an Edelman and Hunter Renfrow, right? I mean, they have a Gronk and Darren Waller, even though those guys are obviously very different type players. But they have a tight end that can, that can get open and create mismatches, right? They have an elite wide receiver in Devontae Adams. They have a good run game. We'll see if they bring Josh Jacobs back. But at the moment, they have a good run game. Could they improve the defense in the offseason? Sure. And it's a tough division you're going to. You're going to the AFC West. But
they just don't have a defense. Like, that team's not Tom Brady away from winning the Super Bowl, I don't think. If I was Tom Brady, I'd go to Miami. And I don't think Tua Tagovailoa was necessarily the future.
The Miami, those are rumors there. You could see on the Jets. Like, again, they're like, they talked about this. Van Pelt talked about this last night on SportsCenter. It's just like, how many teams are there that have a good defensive receiver that are literally just a Tom Brady away from the Super Bowl? He can't go to the and by the way, the Jets are one of those teams,
Jets,
right?
Dolphins.
The Jets, the Dolphins, the Commanders.
Yeah. Play Bill Belichick twice a year. Love that.
The Commanders, jokes aside, but if the J.P. Finley report is true that the team will be sold in March, suddenly if there's a new owner in there, willing to spend some money. Look, they have.
Feels like he's not going to go to the Commanders for some reason. Just feels that way, doesn't it?
It does feel weird, but but in all seriousness, like, you guys are going to call me a homer, and that's fair. And it's fair to call me a homer because I am. But
Travis Homer over here.
Right, but yeah, I'm like Travis Homer. But tell me that, look, Commanders have a good defense. You'll grant me that, right? Right? And, and Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and, like, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, there's some weapons on offense, 100%. They have a couple of good running backs here. They need a quarterback.
To break or something.
What?
Surely we're due to get to break. The Commander, it just feels like he's just not going to go to that franchise with the state that it's in.
Right now.
Yeah.
But tell me if all of a sudden Jeff Bezos pays $7 billion for it in March.
True. Yeah. I mean, talent-wise, sure. They are Tom Brady away from competing for the NFC. I think so.
I mean, that's my only argument there. In the current leadership there's absolutely no chance he goes there.
I think.
But if it's sold to a Bezos, if it's sold to a Josh Harris who owns the Sixers and the Flyers and is like a well-known professional sports owner, like, I wouldn't put a lot of money on it, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I think there's a non-zero chance if the team is sold.
All I'd put money on is that I would need 30-1 that he goes back to Tampa Bay. That just felt like it was done last night. It seemed like that has run its course.
To me, the only way he comes back, because again, he's still got Evans and Godwin, and in theory a good defense. To me, the way it comes back is they get rid of Bowles, they get rid of everyone, and they bring in Brian Flores. Do they hire Brian Flores? Do they bring back Bruce Arians?
That's what I think it would
right?
take, yeah.
Something like that. It would take something like that, I think.
Well, Brady did speak after the game, and the body language, I think, gave it away. But we did hear from Brady after the game on what's next.
Before we get to this clip real quickly, watch this, because I watched this a couple of times. Yeah. And what's interesting is he's sitting there and he's wanting to say nice things about Tampa Bay and what a great home it's been. And you can see he sort of catches himself, because he's about to say, like, this is my home and I love it here. But he realizes, like, there's a chance I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Like, you'll watch. He catches himself. Just watch this clip. This is Tom Brady after the game.
I'm going to go home and get a good night's sleep as good as I can tonight. And you want to take a step out? I mean, that was first. No, I'm not. This has been a lot of focus on, this game. So, yeah, it's just be one day at a time, truly. I just want to say thank you guys for everything this year. I really appreciate all your effort, and I know it's hard for you guys too. It's hard for us players to make it through, and you guys got a tough job, and I appreciate all that you guys do to cover us and everyone who watches and is a big fan of the sport. We're very grateful for everyone's support, and hopefully, I love this organization. It's a great place to be, and thank you everybody for welcoming me, all you regulars, and just very grateful for the respect, and I hope I gave the same thing back to you guys. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You hear those ums?
And there was he said hopefully, and then got off the exit and went to something different. So we don't know where that hopefully was going, but we'll see.
And you can't talk about what the Buccaneers' future looks like until we know who their quarterback is. Honestly, we already know we don't already know, but rumors are strong that Byron Leftwich will be relieved of his duties as offensive coordinator. There's chances that there's going to be other coaching changes. And again, if Brady leaves, we can't talk about the value of Godwin or Evans or Rashad White or Uncle Lenny or any of these guys until we know Kate Otten, until we know what's going on.
This isn't close to the team that won the Super Bowl with Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, those guys, Shaquille Barrett with the injury. I think he's going to choose a better destination.
By the way, speaking of who's available, Antonio Brown. Oh, great. Antonio Brown's out there.
They package deal again?
Package deal again.
I don't think so. I think that ship sailed.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I have a gut feeling on this one.
Is that your advice, Connor, to the people out there? Any NFL teams watching, if you'd like Tom Brady to be on your team, maybe not post about his ex-wife?
Yeah.
Is that a helpful hint?
It's a little PR advice from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't have my PhD in that one, but just a gut feeling.
There you go. A lot of people say Connor is just good looks, but you know what?
There's a brain in there somewhere.
There's a noggin.
I didn't say how big it is.
There's a noggin up there, Sean White. I like it.
All right. We are going to our first break, but when we are back.
Has anyone looked up slalom yet?
When we are back, it's the Peacockys, our awards, the Fantasy Awards, the first annual Fantasy Football Happy Hour award show coming your way.
Burrow takes the snap, gives to Mixon, bouncing it wide to the left. Penalty flag down. He's at the 10, 5, into the end zone. His 5th touchdown.
How about that?
That was the Bengals radio network call on Joe Mixon's 5th touchdown from his Week 9 performance. And welcome to the Peacockys.
The first annual Peacockys. It is our award show, the most prestigious award.
I feel underdressed.
It's the most prestigious award show ever hosted in a fake bar. We were trying to come up with a clever name, right? So, obviously we're on Peacock, so we're thinking about the Peacockys. We thought about, is there a shorthand for it? Because Peacockys or peacock is 2 words. It's pea and cock, right? When you put them together, peacock. Could we call them the peas? That didn't feel right. And then,
no.
and then, all right, well, we get rid of the P. and then my producer Pete said, I have a wife, I have a family.
Yes.
Could you not get me
you
fired?
Have to put food on the table.
Yeah. Could you not go there? So anyway, we're sticking with the Peacockys. Is what I did there.
Connor in the Chris Rock presenter role. Just
I
hoping
wanted
that
a little envelope when I read
Blake doesn't
them.
come up and punch him in the face.
And the Peacocky goes to,
keep Will Smith's wife's name out of your damn
no
mouth.
wife jokes on this desk. That's not from me.
For the record, before we get into the Peacockys, I think very important pressing thing. It took me literally 2 clicks on Google in terms of slalom, and this is from the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
One of my favorite
dictionaries. What does slalom mean in skiing? Skiing in a zigzag or wavy course between upright obstacles.
It's an event.
Skiing in a zigzag or wavy course. So when I say slalom, I was right.
I think it's more hips and legs.
Whatever, I'm not a skier. But my point is less about my form and more the point is I was right. Damn it. Now let's get to the Peacockys.
Right.
Not the peas.
Yes.
The Peacockys.
Peacockys.
The Peacockys.
The first category is Fantasy Game of the Year. And here are your Fantasy Game of the Year nominees. We have the infamous Stephon Diggs, Week 2 versus the Titans. 12 catches, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns. Joe Mixon, Week 9. That's what we opened this segment with against the Panthers. He's still running somewhere. 153 rushing yards, 58 receiving yards. 5 touchdowns in Week 9 for Joe Mixon. Justin Fields against the Dolphins in the same week. 123 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 178 yards on the ground, and a rushing touchdown. Josh Jacobs, Week 12 at the Seahawks, 229 rushing yards, 74 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. And our final nominee Mike Evans in Week 17 in a must-win game against the Panthers. 10 catches, 207 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Fellas, this is a pretty even field.
Yeah, unbelievable field. A lot of great potential winners here. Honestly, you could have picked any one of these guys and gone with that and have been an absolutely, completely legitimate. Just so you know, we probably should have set this up before I derailed us with the slalom stuff. And so what we did is, so Jay and I each picked our winners, but we also then went out to the fans, and we had thousands of people vote on this online, and so that'll be the actual winner is the fans' vote, because everyone knows the Peacockys are about the people, right? You know, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that about the Peacockys. And so for me, like, I went back and forth on this one, and for me, I felt like Fantasy Game of the Year had to be something that not only obviously won you your week, you know, a huge thing, but like, when did it come in the season? And more importantly, were you able to take advantage of it? So for me, like, and one of the concerns with Josh Jacobs and Mike Evans was that Josh Jacobs, that particular game, he'd been listed as questionable all week long, and he'd actually showed up on the injury report on Friday as questionable. It was also a late game. And so the concern was, and I know a number of people that missed out on that game because they're like, he re-injured himself on Friday, playing Seattle. It's a late game. I don't want to be stuck with, you know, trying to decide between Zamir White and Amir Abdullah. And so they benched, unfortunately, Josh Jacobs. Mike Evans had that monster game. You could say, like, hey, he did it during the fantasy playoffs, you know, amazing. But he was so brutal for the, you know, like the 6 way, right? You probably weren't there to enjoy it. Or you may not have even started. So for me, it was Joe Mixon, who you are normally starting. It's week 9. It's the middle of the year. You know, that's really kind of the crunch time for me. Again, you could have gone with anyone, but it's a top 10 running back game in the last 20 years, right? It's the 9th best game by a running back since the year 2000. 153, 4 touchdowns. He also 4 for 58 and a touchdown. 55.1 fantasy points. It's also the most fantasy points of anyone in any one particular game. So, because I think the most people enjoyed this game, meaning, you know, in week 9, everyone's still alive in their playoffs. Everyone that had Joe Mixon started Joe Mixon in this game. They got 55 points from him. For me, Joe Mixon is your fantasy game of the year.
Yeah, I think, look, objectively, Joe Mixon is the right call because he literally scored more points than anyone else, so that is the fantasy game of the year. I still went with Josh Jacobs, though, because I thought that, one, that Carolina-Cincinnati game was terrible, and no one was watching it unless you had Joe Mixon on your fantasy team, basically. Whereas the Seattle-Vegas game, there were playoff repercussions. It was just such an absurd game, and to end it as well with an 86-yard walk-off touchdown. Jacobs won that game by himself. I was on the Seahawks in this game, and it was just absolute pain the entire time because he was so dominant. And the thing is 229 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Also had 6 catches for 74 yards. Like, he just did everything. And for a guy to have over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game where he's an underdog on the road, I thought that was the performance of the season and racked up his fantasy points.
It was an amazing performance by Josh Jacobs. Kept their playoff hopes alive. The Raiders, and again, less than 100%, kind of a Jordan flu game, if you will, by Josh Jacobs. And I will say that there are other categories that Josh Jacobs is nominated for, so we'll see how that all plays out. But who won the Peacocky? So who takes home the Peacocky?
Let's take a look at the fans' vote, and our first Peacocky Fantasy Game of the Year goes to, from the fans, Joe Mixon at a whopping 57% of the vote. The next closest, as the field kind of evened out, was Justin Fields at 15%. So Joe Mixon's 5-touchdown performance is the people, fantasy game of the year.
There you go. I'm a man of the people. It makes sense that I would be the one that would, the people and I would be simpatico, and that they would be, you know, think. We didn't really talk about Justin Fields there. That was the one thing that one of the other reasons that I voted for Mixon is
he
that
lost.
Like, well, what?
He lost the game.
He lost. Not only did he lose the game, but more importantly, like, Joe Mixon allowed you to overcome Justin Fields, right? I mean, if you face Justin Fields, you're like, I lost. Oh, whoa, Joe Mixon. No, I did not. So there was a lot of, so that was it. But, I mean, Fields had just a monster year as well.
Our next award, Best Value Pick of the Year. The Best Value Pick nominees are, speaking of Josh Jacobs, he's at this list. His ADP was RB23. He finished as RB3 in points per game. Chris Godwin's ADP was wide receiver 34. He finished as a top 15 wide receiver. Tyler Lockett, outside the top 40 in terms of draft position, finished as a top 20 wide receiver. Tua Tagovailoa, drafted outside the top 20 quarterbacks. He finished as QB 10. And Miles Sanders, the man who said, do not draft me in fantasy, drafted as RB 33 by ADP. He finished as RB 15 in total points.
Yeah, look, again, a lot of great nominees here. With Godwin, I always felt like Godwin honestly was just a mistake by, candidly, the people that put together the Yahoo rankings. Because it was just like, we're like, guys, he's not starting the – I mean, we talked about him in the preseason, that the ADP on Godwin was crazy.
He played week 1.
Right. Yeah. We're like, he's not going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list, even if he misses a couple of weeks. Like, the idea that he's going as wide receiver 34 is insane. He's Chris Godwin with Tom Brady as his quarterback here. You know, Lockett is interesting just because, again, we were, all of us, I think collectively, the fantasy community, were down on the Seahawks offense. No one expected Geno to have the kind of year that Geno did. I thought about Miles Sanders and Tua. The concerns there was the inconsistency with both of them. With Sanders, he was a little too touchdown dependent. Now, he finally scored touchdowns this year. You know, the last couple of years he really hasn't. But there was a little bit of inconsistency to Sanders, obviously with Tua with the injuries in and out of the lineup here. So for me, I went with Josh Jacobs, right? I mean, Josh Jacobs not only went as running back 23, but most people felt like that was too high. And I was one of them. Josh Jacobs was by far my biggest miss of the season. And the reason I swung and missed on him is because I was just like, you know why I don't like him? The Raiders don't like him. Yeah. Like, they declined his fifth-year option. This is a guy they used a first-round NFL draft pick on, and they declined his fifth-year option. New regime in Las Vegas with that organization. Josh McDaniels has always used multiple running backs throughout his career. You saw in the preseason game, the Hall of Fame game, where they used him on the first 2 series. There's Derek Carr and Devontae Adams and Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow in street clothes. Like, they ain't playing. We ain't risking them in the first preseason. But here's Josh Jacobs getting 8 carries in the first 10 minutes. And you're like, okay, they do not care about this guy. And Josh Jacobs, by, force of nature, just had, amazing. And the other thing was, he finishes, he finishes as the 3rd best running back in fantasy, consistent week in, week out. He just produced at a high level, massive volume, 20 touches this year in 12 different games, over 1,600 rushing yards, had, a lot of pass catching involvement too, Jay. To me, he's by clear the best value pick.
Yeah, has to be. Yeah. Has to be Josh Jacobs. I think that the thing is that he was drafted after A.J. Dillon and David Montgomery. And for him to do what he did, won the rushing title, I'm still not sure he's thought of in the same breath as like Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. He's that good. He might even be better than those guys. The talent that he has is absurd. Nick Bosa called him the best running back he's ever faced. And I still don't think America is perhaps entirely across the Josh Jacobs experience, maybe because no one got to see the 86-yard touchdown against Seattle on television because every network broke away from it on the East Coast. So he is amazing, and he is the winner here.
And it is. It's one of those weird things. So he plays on a quote-unquote bad team, the Raiders. They were alive in the playoffs for a while, but, they were in the lower part of that division, obviously. And there's nothing, like, he doesn't have a fun name like Christian McCaffrey, or, Like, there's no nickname for him. I know it sounds dumb, but, like, because Josh Jacobs is sort of like just kind of a solid name. Like
2 first names, too.
Two
Not
first
trustworthy.
names. 2 first names for me is always a crowd pleaser, but the fact is right. But yes, maybe not trustworthy. But Josh Jacobs just feels like, Josh Jacobs feels like a middle manager in accounting. Like he's just like, he's like whatever, the senior assistant director of HR. I got to go see Mr. Jacobs. I don't know. He just doesn't have the national profile. I think that it seems the dumbest thing in the world, but if he had a more fun name, Dalvin Cook, like, that's a good name. Like, I don't know.
Well, guys, safe to say,
but the fans, who do the fans vote for the Peacocky?
A runaway here from the fans. The Peacocky goes to Josh Jacobs, best value pick of the 2022 fantasy season. He takes home 86% of the vote. Miles Sanders, Tyler Lockett, both 4%. Tua and Godwin at 3%. So this was a runaway for Josh Jacobs. But
much like he did against Seattle.
Yes, it's a wild year for Josh Jacobs, who will do quite well, I think, in free agency if he avoids the franchise tag. Let's get to our next award here. Best waiver wire pickup of the season right here. As you see the nominees, let's start with Justin Fields, who finished as QB5 on the season. Evan Ingram, who finished as tight end 7. Jamal Williams finished as a top 20 running back. Tyler Algier had almost 1,200 scrimmage yards after being a day 3 pick. Pretty good for the rookie for the Falcons. And Jerick McKinnon, RB2 in points per game over the final pivotal 6 weeks of the season. Barry, out of this list, is there a runaway like Jacobs was on the last one, or is this field a little tighter?
I think the field's a little tighter, but I think there's a clear winner here. At least there was for me. I mean, McKinnon was amazing, especially down the stretch. Like, he won a lot of people their fantasy titles. Evan Ingram, in a year in which tight end is just sort of like absolutely a wasteland, Ingram had a great year as a top 7 guy. I mean, Jamal Williams and Algier, again, running back, kind of a wasteland as well, and both guys provided lots of value, although with Williams, again, so touchdown dependent, and, felt like he was better at the beginning of the year than he was towards the end. Algier, better towards the end of the year. And you never fully trusted it just because Atlanta's such a low-volume offense. So for me, I feel like it's Justin Fields. This was a bad year for quarterbacks in general. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, some of the big-name veteran guys that were drafted inside the top 12 didn't have those kind of years. Kyler Murray gets hurt. Lamar Jackson misses time. It was a very inconsistent year for big-name fantasy quarterbacks, and yet, and obviously Russell Wilson just completely, the bottom fell out on him, and yet Justin Fields just exploded. In the last 9 games he played, guys, he had over 20 fantasy points in 6 of them. You think about those weeks 9 through 10, where he had back-to-back games with over 39 fantasy points. 7 different games with 80 or more rushing yards. We always talk about the importance of rushing for a quarterback. So for me, because of actually how bad the quarterback position was, I got to go with Justin Fields.
Has to be Fields. You're not supposed to be able to find top 5 quarterbacks on the waiver wire, so it has to be Fields.
Yeah, he probably bailed a lot of people out that missed early on a quarterback and probably saved their season. Let's look at what the fans thought of this one, and no surprise here, Fields takes home the Peacockys for the best waiver wire pickup with 52% of the vote, a bit of a runaway here. McKinnon did get 25% of the votes. I guarantee 22% of those voters, he probably won them their season down the stretch, McKinnon.
Second half of the year, he had 8 receiving touchdowns, the most by any running back. 5 more than Samaje Perine or Tony Pollard, who were second place with 3. 8 receiving touchdowns from week 9 on for Jerick McKinnon. He won a bunch of people their titles, including me. Just want to put that out there that I won a bunch of leagues with Jerick McKinnon. Thank you very much. No big deal, NBD. I just want to say that. But yeah, Justin Fields, congratulations.
Your first Peacocky.
Let's see. So yeah, anyway, congratulations to Justin Fields winning a Peacocky. The Bears get the number 1 pick and have a Peacocky winner.
Pretty good.
Things are looking up in Chicago.
Our next award is the Fantasy Rookie of the Year, and here are the nominees, starting with Kenneth Walker, who finished as RB16 this year. Chris Olave, wide receiver 26, finished for him. Garrett Wilson not far behind, wide receiver 30. Shout out to Olave and Garrett Wilson for persevering, considering their quarterback situations. Dameon Pierce missed the end of the season, still finished as RB20. And Christian Watson, who got hot in the second half of the year, finishes as wide receiver 32. Jay, you look at this board right here, there's obviously a pretty big disparity in the guy at the top on the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be Ken Walker. Feels like a kind of Shakespeare in Love Best Picture winner, not your best ever, not your Casablanca types, but I do think that Ken Walker, just with the 9 touchdowns to go with the 1K yards. I mean, he didn't have a touchdown in his last 5 games. He kind of cooled off, but he did enough in that middle stretch of the season. The winner should have been Breece Hall, but he gets hurt, so Ken Walker.
Yeah, nice bone you throw there to our Jets guy here. It's interesting, and that's the cooled off is the key phrase there, because as you look through all these, Chris Olave started hot, cooled off. Dameon Pierce started hot, cooled off. Christian Watson started cold, got hot, cooled off. And
Garrett
so
Wilson was like the
Garrett
roller coaster.
Wilson, right? I mean, it was just like, okay, who's playing quarterback this week? We're in on Garrett Wilson. Oh no, it's a Zach Wilson. No, yeah. So it just like inconsistency with all these rookies, which isn't surprising. That's why they're rookies here. So I think just because, given the wasteland that is running back and the touchdowns, Ken Walker III, KW3 is my choice as well. But who got the Peacocky?
Well, and the fan vote goes to,
as we see Ken Walker just
running over,
just rolling over Raiders. That's the best run.
The fan vote goes to KW3. Kenneth Walker, 77% of the vote. A huge runaway here. The next closest was Chris Olave at 10%. Throw you a quick one here, guys.
And I will say that I think that had the Saints been better, had Dalton been better, Olave might win this award. But I think just, he really sunk that offense.
Counting Breece Hall in this group, who gets drafted first in fantasy next year, Barry? Pretty tough, right?
It is pretty tough. I'm going to still say Ken Walker for me, just because you don't have the injury concerns with Breece Hall. You feel better about that offense with Geno, assuming Geno Smith is back with the Seahawks, and we expect that to happen. You feel better about that offense. Rashad Penny was on a one-year deal, so we'll see if they bring him back, but this is clearly Ken Walker's backfield. Breece Hall coming off the ACL. They still have Michael Carter there. They're going to still have Bam Knight. Obviously, it'll be Breece Hall's backfield when he starts, but you're just not going to know. Is he going to be fully healthy and have that explosiveness, at least to start the season? So I think Ken Walker gets drafted first. But future is bright, obviously, for Breece Hall. And had he stayed healthy the whole season, he probably wins this award. I agree with you, Jay.
Our next award, Breakout Player of the Year. This is a great field here, guys, and I think one of our more even ones. Tony Pollard, drafted as RB34 by ADP, finished as RB8 in points per game, a top 10 running back finish for Tony Pollard. Ramondre Stevenson, Barry, you loved him over the summer, and you reaped those rewards here. Drafted as RB32, finished as RB10. Devontae Smith, ADP of wide receiver 40, finished as wide receiver 14 in points per game. Christian Kirk, that signing was great for Jacksonville, drafted as wide receiver 38, finished as a top 20 wide receiver, as you see on the screen. Daniel Jones, drafted as QB 29. He has a top 10 QB finish, QB 8. So your ride or die from years ago, Daniel Jones, it finally comes to fruition.
Listen, I'm a genius. It's not my job to tell you when to listen to me. I just spew the knowledge, and then you guys have to figure out when it's. Look, I was just early. What can I help it that I can just see into the future that far ahead? Normally, I'm able to control my powers and Jalen Hurts this year, Austin Eckler last year, but I was just too early on Daniel Jones. So screw all you naysayers. He had an awesome year. Finishes his QB8 in points per game. Has his Giants heading to the divisional round. Right here are the only guys that had 20 or more fantasy points in 5 games this season: Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Daniel freaking Dimes. How about them apples? Look, I think, Christian Kirk got the big contract, had a chance to be, number one in Jacksonville, finished as a top 20 wide receiver in points per game despite an ADP of wide receiver 38. Wide receiver 38 finishes wide receiver 18. Devontae Smith, everyone's like, oh, this is going to be a run-heavy and A.J. Brown show. ADP of wide receiver 40, wide receiver 14. I loved me some Ramondre. Kept talking about this is going to be Ramondre Stevens' season, and I so wanted to vote for him. But the answer's got to be Tony Pollard. Even in a year in which Zeke basically stayed healthy, he only missed 2 games. The fact of the matter is that Tony Pollard established himself not only as the number one running back in that Cowboys offense, but as a number one running back in fantasy.
Yeah, you going with Pollard as well?
No, I'm going with Dimes. I think Dimes was just more surprising.
Just the B-roll for you.
Yeah, I think we all saw the path for Pollard if he got more usage. Daniel Jones was extremely turnover prone. They declined his 5th-year option. Now he looks like an above-average quarterback who's the least turnover prone quarterback in the league. The rushing volume is insane, so I'm going Dimes.
My only pushback on that is I would argue that people didn't see that. The counter argument to Tony Pollard were 2 things. Number one, obviously Ezekiel Elliott, but also can this guy withstand? He's too much of a scat back. He's too much. By the way, which is ridiculous because he's 6'2". He's not. Because he's so fast. No, because he's so fast. I think people, and because he's built so differently than Ezekiel Elliott, that people just assume he's a quote unquote prototypical pass-catching running back. But no, he's not. He's a bigger guy who ran between the tackles in college.
Absolutely.
He can handle a full workload, but I think the general narrative on him that he couldn't handle a full workload, and this year he proved he could.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at who the fans decided on for Breakout Player of the Year, and the Peacocky goes to Tony Pollard in a closer one. 47% of the vote goes to Pollard. Ramondre Stevenson actually comes in second.
I really wanted to vote
25%.
for him too, but Tony Pollard can't be denied. He's earned a Peacocky. Exactly. Like the Peacocky absolutely goes to him. When you look at the photo of Tony Pollard, you're like, that's a Peacocky winner. That's the kind of guy. That's the kind of guy that deserves a Peacocky.
All right, we're going to break. When we are back, we are continuing the Peacocky Awards, the annual Peacocky Awards, with the biggest bust and
this
fantasy.
Might be one and done. I'm being honest. I don't know if it's annual yet.
Annual,
might be one and done.
every single year. We've never missed one.
I'll tell you what you didn't win. The hearts of America, the hearts of Falcons fans, the hearts of Kyle Pitts' mom. I'll tell you, you didn't win any of that. All you won was 2 losses. That's right. And I don't even know if that makes sense. You won losses, because that's all you've got to show for yourself, Arthur Smith. Free Kyle Pitts.
And he go off in week 3. We just gonna say, woo!
Peacockys, and you know what that video means. Time for biggest bust of the season.
Right. Are you saying that video was the biggest bust? Because that would be a fair criticism.
No, there was a glimmer of hope after that video.
Well, here's the thing. Lawrence is funny. Like, Lawrence can get away with that. I just look like an old man there. In fairness, I always look like an old man because you know what? I am, in fact, an old man.
Biggest bust nominees. We start with Jonathan Taylor, drafted obviously as RB1. He finished as RB17. Najee Harris, drafted as RB6 with ADP, finished as RB19, just snuck in the top 20 at the end of the season. Kyle Pitts, drafted with an ADP of tight end 3, finishes as tight end 22 in an awful year for the tight end position. Allen Robinson, drafted as a top 20 receiver, finished outside the top 50. And Russell Wilson, drafted as a top 10 quarterback and finished as QB 18. Plenty of great selections here for you guys. Jay, are you going with the obvious? Who is the worst?
Well, people are going to say Jonathan Taylor, and I don't agree with that because I think that was a health thing. Like, when he was healthy, he was fine. He played some games banged up. It has to be Kyle Pitts. People were making the case for Kyle Pitts as probably the same group as Kelsey and Andrews.
Sure.
And to be tight end 22 when he was healthy, I mean, yeah, it's a disaster. So he's the winner for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're just talking through some of these other guys, right? I mean, Jonathan Taylor, again, I'm with you. Like, had you grabbed Deion Jackson, like, you could have gotten production. Running back 17 obviously is not ideal, but it's also usable.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like, again, disappointing and not what you want out of the number 1 player overall, but it's usable. It doesn't absolutely kill you. Allen Robinson killed you. I mean, like, a lot of people came out of the draft with him as their number 2 wide receiver, his ADP of wide receiver 18. He was a top 20 guy. He finished as wide receiver 56, and candidly, I'm surprised it's that high. I mean, like, he was just absolutely brutal. Think about Russell Wilson. Again, quarterback's supposed to be this deep position, right? Top 10 quarterback drafted, ADP of QB 9, QB 18, and like a bad 18, right? I mean, like, he was just, like, absolutely lost you weeks. Najee Harris, same thing. Drafted as a top 10, but he was usable down the stretch. He was okay. Kyle Pitts is the clear answer because, first off, there's a strategy thing when you go into a draft. Am I taking a tight end high or not? And if you take a tight end high, you are giving up a running back or a wide receiver. So you need elite production from that tight end to take him high. It's why the Kelsey argument in the first 2 rounds is always there. And so not only did he have a 3rd round ADP overall, and not only he didn't give you elite production at the tight end, also the opportunity cost of who you could have drafted for him, as you see it there, 42% of America votes for him for the Peacocky. This should have been 100%. He's the biggest bust. Like, I mean, under 30 receiving yards in 7 of 10 games, under 5 fantasy points in 6 of 10 games. Like, it wasn't that he was semi-usable or a disappointment. He killed you. He killed you.
All right, and with that, we are going to one more break. When we're back, we're coming back on a lighter note and looking at the fantasy MVPs.
He's the winner of a Peacocky, and I'm not even giving him the P.
You are currently seeing the fan vote for the fantasy MVP of the season, and who takes it home but Travis Kelce, beating out Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Hurts, and Tyreek Hill. Just an incredible year in what was a wasteland for the tight end position. Kelce takes this one home, guys.
I voted for Eckler because he's my ride or die, and he was so good in the playoffs. But Travis Kelce had, he was so much better than he's 100 points better than tight end 2. So not only was he elite, but he was elite at a position where no one else was. So, Kelce, I understand why the fans voted for him. He's an easy pick.
Yep, close, controversial vote. Shades of Crash over Brokeback Mountain, but I'm going with Kelce as well. I just think relative to position, he was the guy.
Yeah.
And our last Peacocky, the Fantasy Playoffs MVP. If this guy won you a league, yo, him a big thank you. And I do want to start with the fans, guys, right here. The nominees were Patrick Mahomes in the Fantasy Playoffs, averaging 27.3 points per game. CeeDee Lamb, 24.9 points. Christian McCaffrey, 23.6. George Kittle, after a solid year, explodes in the Fantasy Playoffs. And then Cam Akers, averaging over 20 points.
McCaffrey gets the win here. I voted for Kittle just because, again, the tight end position. He had 5 touchdowns during the fantasy playoffs. But, look, CMC averaged 24.3 fantasy points per game over the fantasy playoffs. 7
Kittle
total touchdowns in his final 6 weeks of the season. He's very worthy of a Peacocky. We're being played off the stage, guys. Love you all. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, okay, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.